Hey there, friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pehei, Daf 85 of Masechta Yevamos, friends. Who can tell me what Daf 85 talks about? Well, we said at the end of the Daf yesterday, I said that while a kohen is not allowed to marry a chalala, a chalal is allowed to marry a ksheira. A ksheira, like a kohenes who's ksheira would be allowed to marry a chalal. That would be acceptable. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit, and then oh no, I think the washing machine is beeping. Oh man, I'll have to do something about that, Lamaisa. Anyways, yes, we talk about that for a little bit. Then we talk about shnis larayis. Talk about Kohen Gadol, right? Kohen Gadol, Amar the Kohen Gadol, Gushvachlutzel Kohen Edget. So very, very exciting sugyas on today's daf and daf peh. Excuse me one second. I'm gonna have a look at the washing machine for a second. All right, yeah. So it looks like the washing machine is sort of done doing its thing, and it needed me to turn it off. Let's go weiter. Otherwise, it's gonna keep beeping. There's no way to turn off the beep, it seems. All right, let's go. Well, I mean, there is a way to turn off the beep, but it involves you going there. All right. So we're on Daf Pei Dalet Beis. We got some work to do over here. We got about 15 lines from the bottom of Pei Dalet Beis by the two dots where it says Gufa. Here we go. Gufa. We said earlier, Amar V'Yudah Marav says, V'Yudah in the name of Rav, Lo Huzaru Ksheris L'Nafsei Livsulin. That ksheris, kohanos, female kohens, priestesses. Ooh, that sounds like a nice word. A priestess. That sounds pretty cool. A priestess. A priestess. Is that a word? That sounds like a cool kind of thing. A priestess. All right. A priestess. Should we go for it? Let's go for it. So it says, Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, that a priestess is allowed to marry a chalal. Well, let's say that our Mishnah is taka support for this notion. Chalal shenasa ksheira. Well, because after all, our Mishnah talks about a chalal who marries a ksheira. My love, kohenes haru'ilo. Mistama, this ksheira that we're talking about is a kohenes. Haru'ilo, as Rashi points out, that apparently it's ideal for a kohen to marry a kohenes, for a priest to marry a priestess. And therefore, it must be that if we're talking about a chalal shenasa ksheira, what does it mean ksheira? Ksheira, that she's the ideal match for a priest. Umay ksheira, ksheira l'chuna. Means that she's an ideal match for a priest. Lo Yisraelis, no, it's not talking about a priestess, it's talking about a Jewess. Umay ksheira, well, kilo Yisraelis. Umay ksheira, ksheira l'kol. What does it mean that she's ksheira? It means that she's ksheira to the congregation. She's just a regular Jew. A regular Yisraelis. Ihachi. If that's the case, yeshel ach kosher nami. But then one second, when we talk about in the Mishnah that if this priest has, right, this chalal has a brother who's a kosher l'kol, does that mean that he's allowed to marry into the kahal michlal dehu pasul l'kol? What, saying that the chalal is pasul to the congregation? I mean that's not true, right? Meaning if we're saying that the brother is kosher, implying that the chalal is pasul, and we're saying that kosher to the congregation is then pasul to the congregation, but the chalal isn't pasul to the congregation. You can marry a Bas Yisrael, or even a kohenes, we're saying. So elalav kohen, rather it's talking about that he's kosher as a kohen. Umidehu kosher, umidehu kohen, he kohenes. And if we're saying that when we talk about his brother being a kosher, and it's talking about kosher as a kohen, so it must mean that when it says that she's a ksheira, we're talking about a kohenes who's ksheira, and we're saying that she's allowed to marry a chalal, midi irya, ha-kadisa, va-kadisa. To which the Gemara says, meh. You could say that they're talking about two different cases. You could say that by the brother, we're talking about he's kosher as a kohen, whereas by the ksheira, who's married to the chalal, maybe it means just a regular Yisrael. It's not necessarily a proof to say that we're talking about that a kohenes would be able to marry a chalal. Masav Ravin bar Nachman asked Akasha lo yikachu. That when the pasuk says by a kohen, it says lo yikachu twice. What does the pasuk say? Ishazon v'chalal lo yikachu. that a kohen doesn't marry a zona or a chalala, v'isha grusha meisha lo yikachu, and also a kohen doesn't marry a divorcee. So it says in the pasuk twice yikachu. So melamed she'isha museres aida ish, that just like the when it comes to a chalala marrying a kohen, so the kohen is not allowed to marry the chalala. So, and if he does, it's a lav on his part. Well, the same thing applies to her as well. That if she, excuse me, I have to sneeze. Give me a second. False alarm. What a waste of time. Anyways, so just like he as a priest is not allowed to marry a chalala, and if he does, it's a lav. So then also, it's also her as well. Kilu, if she's a chalala, she is not allowed to marry a priest, right? They both have a lav, just like he has a lav, she has a lav. Melamed she'isha museres aida ish, that she is warned. I'm sorry, I explained that wrong. Rather, melamed she'isha museres aida ish, meaning what we want to say, right? Meaning the Brisa says, okay, the Brisa says lo yikachu, lo yikachu. It says lo yikachu twice, and it says melamed she'isha museres aida ish, that the woman is warned on account of the husband. Now, what we want to say that this means is that, well, just like a kohen who's a kosher is not allowed to marry a chalala, so we want to say that the inverse would also be true, that a kshere, right, a kohenes who's a kshere should not be able to marry a chalal, right, and that would sort of be against Rav Yehuda Amarav. So Amarav kol echadu muzar he museres v'kol echadu lo muzar he lo mizdaira. To which Rava says, no, that's not what it means. It's not to say that a kohenes is forbidden from marrying a chalal. That's not true. A kohenes is allowed to marry a chalal. What this pasuk is coming to teach us is that in the case of a kohen who's kosher, who's not allowed to marry a chalala, so it applies to both of them. Meaning, just like he is prohibited from marrying her, she is also prohibited from marrying him. Now, but one second. This isn't learnt out from here. This is learnt out from a different statement of Rav Yehuda Amarav. Rav Yehuda Amarav, v'chein dever b'shmal isha ki yaisim kol chatos ha'adam. That by me'ilah, it says that if a man or a woman, does something that he's chayv to bring an osher me'ilos for, hishvakosu b'isha le'ish l'chol shabatorah. And we learn out from there that men and women are compared to one another when it comes to lavin, when it comes to punishments, when it comes to lo ta'ases in the Torah. So what do we see? So we see from there that men and women are in the same boat when it comes to lavin. And therefore, I know from that statement of Rav Yehuda Amarav from Me'ilah, I know that if a kohen kosher is not allowed to marry a chalala, so memele it applies to him and to her, because when it comes to lavin, it applies, right? It says lo yikachu, you can't get married. So just like he can't get married, she also can't get married. So I know that already, that it applies to both of them. To which the Gemara says not true. Imeahi, if I would only have this pasuk of by Me'ilah, havamina lava shove bako, I would only know about prohibitions about lavin that apply to everybody, not just a specific subset of the Jewish people, but apply to all the Jewish people, right? For example, right, a lav, a general prohibition that applies to all Jews. But something doesn't apply to all Jews. For example, a Kohen, right? We're talking about who a Kohen can marry. That's a specific subset. I might think that law, right, prohibitions that apply to specific subsets of Jews. So maybe there we would not say that men and women are equal. So therefore, we need this pasuk or this brisa that says lo yikachu, that the pasuk says lo yikachu twice to teach that just like he is prohibited from marrying her, also she is prohibited from marrying him, even though it's a subset, and I don't know that from the other pasuk by Me'ilah Varei Tuma. But what about Tuma, friends? When it comes to Tuma. Tumas Hames. So of course, Kohanim are not allowed to become tumah impure via corpse tumah. Now that only applies to Kohanim. It doesn't apply to Yisraelim. Right? Yisraelim can become tamei, touch corpses all they want. A Kohen cannot. So tumah is something that applies only to Kohanim, only to a particular subset of Jews, the priest class, or what's the word that they use with this stuff? Caste. The priest caste. Can you use the word caste with priests? Maybe. Akopanim, the priests. And yet it says, so it's a lav, right? Only priests have a prohibition against becoming tamei to corpses. And not only does this prohibition apply only to the men, does it not only apply to the priests, it only applies to the men because the pasuk says b'nei aharon v'lo b'nos aharon, the men, but the women can become tamei to corpses. Halavachi, but if not for the fact that I had a special limud that says b'nei aharon v'lo b'nos aharon, havamina noshim chayavos, I would have thought to say that the women would be chayiv just like the men are chayiv. So therefore the kasha is, it sounds like by default, we do learn out from Me'ilah that prohibitions apply to men and to women, even by subsets, even when it only applies to Kohanim. So my time, lav mishum ta'avira amar suamai b'nei aharon halav achi ava minu nashim chayavos. My timer. Why would I have thought they would be chayavos? Lav mishum ta'avira amar rav. It's not because of the limud from Me'ilah. Lo, that's not why. Digamina milo yikachu. No, it's tafka because from Kohanim, right? When it says by a kohen marrying a halal, it says lo yikachu, and over there it applies to, we're saying because it says lo yikachu twice, it applies to him and it applies to her. So therefore we know that also by subsets, the things that only apply to Kohanim, also we compare, right? We say that men and women are both liable, and therefore I would have thought that by Tumah, women would be liable, and therefore it says b'nei aharon to the exclusion of b'nos aharon, and don't say that it applies to women as well. Ichidam, those who say kicha etztrichale sagadaite chamina ligamer mituma kamashmalon, or you could say the opposite, right? Which is meaning I would have thought that, meaning we have by Me'ilah it says ish o isha, and therefore we compare men and women to all prohibitions, fine. But then we have by Tuma, which is something that only applies to Kohanim, and we're saying there that it only applies to the men and not to the women, and therefore I may have thought to say that also by a Kohen marrying a Chalala, it only applies, the prohibition is only to him but not to her. So therefore I need lo yikachu twice to say no, it applies to her as well. Friends, let's move on. Rav Papa, Rav Huna Bar Yeshua iklu lehinatzvu. So, or hinsivu. The Agos Abach changes it to shchansivu. There's also a place called shchansiv. Is it maybe shchansiv? Friends, what should we say? I kind of want to say shchansiv. I actually don't see that anywhere. So, if I guess based on what we see, it's probably wrong. But I feel like in every other place we see shchansiv. Is it possible there's a place called shchansivu and shchansiv? How many things like that could there be? I mean, it's a pretty random name. Shchansiv? Who's ever heard of Shchansiv? Let's go weiter. So Rav Papa Rav Huna Bar Yeshua iklu l'Shchansiv. So Rav Papa Rav Huna Bar Yeshua, his sidekick, visited Shchansiv. La'asir Davidi Bar Avin, and that is where Rav Idi Bar Avin lived. Of course, there are people outside making noise. They do it just to distract me, No, that's not nice. That's not nice. They don't even know that I'm recording. Let's go weiter. Ba'uminayu. And when Rav Papa and Rav Huna Bar Yeshua got to Shchansiv, they asked, right, the people there asked Rav Papa and Rav Huna Bar Yeshua, whose haruksheris linose livsulin olo, can kohanos who are ksheris marry like a chalal? By the way, my neighbor is relatively effective at going out, and it's almost borderline humorous. She like, oh, I think she might be yelling at them. One second. Yeah, anyways, she's like pretty effective at like, it's so funny. There's like all these tour groups that end up in the park outside the house. I mean, I'll be honest, like, they're kind of loud and, I don't really love it, but it's like so funny. She like goes out and yells at them. Like, they're probably allowed to be like in the park, but she makes it very unpleasant for them to be there until they leave. All right, I mean, like, look, at the end of the day, like, I don't really mind to the extent that it kind of, gets them to be quiet, but she's probably not right. All right, let's go weiter. So, Fine. So Papa and Rafuna Breda Rishua, they visit Shchansiv, and the people ask them, "Who's our ksheris linasa lefsulin alo? Are the ksheris, are the kosher kohanos allowed to marry a cholol?" Amru Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, "Well, Tnisua. You all learned the last parak of Masechta Kiddushin. The Mishnah says, Asar yuchsin olam mibavel. There were 10 lineages, 10 types of Yidden who made aliyah from Babylonia to Eretz Yisrael, where I live. Kohanim, Levim, V'Yisraelim, priests, Levites, Israelites, Chalalim, Gerim, Cholos, converts, V'Charurim, freed slaves, Umamzerim, Nesinim, Shtuki, V'Asufi, Mamzers, Nosins, Shtukis, people who we don't know who the father is, V'Asufi, and also people we don't know who the parents are, we just kind of found them. Kohanim, Levim, V'Yisraelim, priests, Levites, and Israelites, Mutar and Lavos Abazah, they're allowed to marry into each other. Levim, Yisraelim, Chalalim, Gerim, Charurim, all those people, the Levites, the Israelites, the Chalols, the Gerims, and the Charurims, Mutar and Lavos Abazah, they can marry into each other. Interestingly, the Kohanim are not included in that list. Gere, Charure, Umamzeri, Nisini, Shtuki, Vasufi, Mutar and Lavos Abazah, and converts, freed slaves, Mamzers, Nosins, Shtukis, Asufis, they could all marry into each other. Very nice. But conspicuously, Kohanos marrying Cholos was left out. So Rav Papa wants to say from there that a Kohenes would not be allowed to marry a Cholo. Amalei Rav Huna Beida of Yoshua, but Rav Huna Beida of Yoshua says, "Called Heicha dehani nosve mehani vani nosve mehani katoni." So it says Rav Huna Beida of Yoshua, but not necessarily, because when we say that the different people, right, Kohen, right, when we said, for example, a Levi and Yisrael can marry a Cholol, so that's because a Cholol could marry them, and also if they are like Cholols, then they would be able to marry like Yisraels, I guess, meaning if it applies to the boys and the girls. But came the Ilu Bar Leminsa of Chalola Asira Lei. But since when it comes to a Kohen and a Chalala, if the Kohen wants to marry a Chalala, that wouldn't be allowed, right? Only if a Cholol wants to marry a Kohenes. But since it doesn't work in both directions, so Katani, it didn't list it, but still a Kohenes would be allowed to marry a Cholol, just that a Chalala would not be allowed to marry a Kohen. Also, L'kamid Ravidi Bar Oven, they then came before Ravidi Bar Oven, Armalu, and he said to him, Dardake, sharp ones, Hachyom Reviuda Marav. After all, this is what Reviuda Marav said, Lahuzuru Ksheris, Li'nose, Livsulim, that Ksheris are permitted to marry Cholos. All right, very beautiful, very, very, very beautiful story there with Rav Papa and Rav Huna Beida of Yoshua, Ravidi Bar Oven, and Shchansiv. All right. So we had talked about in our Mishnah Shnias, right? For example, your mother's mother. So Shnias. So we said in that case they don't get a ksube, they don't get, she doesn't, there's no ksube, he doesn't have to pay her for the fruits of the nichsim lug that he consumed, things like that. So b'mine b'nei biri mirav sheshes. So the people of Biri asked Rav Sheshes, shnia lebaal v'lo shnia liyavam. What if, you ready for this question, friends? What if she was, I guess the relationship between the man and the wife was such that, I don't know, it was his grandmother or something. It's a shnia to him, but to the brother, if he goes to Wellwood, the brother, right, she's not a shnias to the brother. So would the yavam pay her ksube or not? Would the yavam pay her ksube or not? We had learned earlier on Daf Lamed Ches that the ksube, right? When you have yibum, right? So Reuven's married to Sarah, Reuven goes to Wellwood, Shimon does yibum with Sarah. So the ksube that Sarah receives, the payment that she receives, comes from Reuven's estate, not from Shimon's. So now in this case, when she was married to Reuven, it was a shnias larayis, and therefore there was no ksuba. Now, if she does yibum with Shimon, well, Shimon's not a shnias larayis with her, so technically speaking, she would be able to have a ksuba from Shimon. But the thing is that we also said that the ksuba dafka comes from the first husband, and there was no ksuba from the first husband because it was shnius larayis. Right, so do we say, I'm going to read that again, Kevin the Amar Mar, since we said Ksubasa Nichse Baila Rishon, that the Ksube comes from her first husband, Leisla, so therefore, the first husband was Shnias Larayis, there is no Ksube, so therefore she doesn't get any Ksube. Or Dilmar, perhaps we say, Kevin the Ilu Leisla Merishin Takinu La Rabbanu Misheni Isla. Or do we say that, well, just like we said earlier in Daf Lamed Ches, that if the husband, didn't have any property, didn't have with what to pay her ksuba. So in that case, we say that the yavam, that Shimon would be responsible for the ksuba, so that it makes it difficult for him to just easily divorce her. So since we say that over there, if there is no property from the first husband, so then the second husband does take responsibility for the ksuba. So maybe this would be like that. That, well, there's no ksuba from the first husband because of Shnius Larayus, so therefore, maybe then Shimon, the brother who is not Shnius Larayus, would be responsible for the ksuba. Omar Lahu, Rav Sheshes, said something in Yisua, we have a brayso that says, Ksubasa al nichse baila arishon, that the ksuba is paid by the first husband, V'im hoisa shnia liva'al, and if she was a Shnius Larayus with the husband, with Ruvain, afilu miyavam, ein la, that she doesn't even get her ksube from Shimon. She doesn't get her ksube from Shimon. So says Rav Sheshes, she would not get the ksube from Shimon. But one second, ask the Gemara, if we say that, meaning this Bryce is a little bit weird, right? It says that she gets her ksuba from the original husband, and if the original husband was a shnia, so then she doesn't even get it from the second, from Shimon. Does that imply that there would be a case where she would get it from Shimon? Right? Is there a case where she would be paid her ksuba from Davka, from Shimon? Yeah, it's missing a few words. This is really how you have to understand the Braise. That she gets her ksuba from her first husband, from Reuven. And if Reuven doesn't have property with which to pay Sarah her ksubah, so then Shimon would take responsibility for the ksubah. But if she was shnius larayis with Reuven, so then when she does yibum with Shimon, even though she's not shnius larayis with Shimon, she would not get her ksubah from Shimon. If you have an almane who's married to a kohen gadol, or a grusha or a chalutza married to a kohen hedget, yesh lein mizonis or in lein mizonis, do they get paid? Right? Does the husband have responsibility to pay for her food, to support her, to sustain her, or not? Right? Meaning, our Mishnah had said that Amana l'kohen gadol, grusha v'achlus l'kohen hedget, they get a ksube. That they get ksube, and if they get divorced, they get back to nichse tzon barzel, etc. So, what about mizonis? Is that included as well? So now hechidami. So the Gemara says, wait, now what exactly is the case? I lema diyazva tuse b'mod v'hoitze kohen mizonis isla. 1 second. If they're married and they're living together, amon l'kohen gadol, kushvachlus l'kohen hedget, he's got to get rid of her. What do you mean sustain her? What do you mean give her mizonis? They can't be together. Of course, he's not chayiv for mizonis. He has his chayiv to get divorced. So it's talking about where the kohen gadol and the almana got married, and then he goes on business or something. Vilavsa, and she borrowed money in order to pay for her own food. Ve'achla mai. So is the husband now, right, the kohen gadol or the kohen hedget, is he responsible to pay back the loan, or does she have to pay back her own loan? So do we say mizone t'nai ksubininu? Look, as we said in the Mishnah, that she gets her ksuba, and written in the ksuba is that he's responsible for her mizonis to pay for her food. So mi the isla ksube, isla mizone. So if she has a ksube, so memele she has mizone as well, that he has to pay for her food. Odum ksuba de mishkol umeipak isla. But or do we say no? Look, it means that if they get divorced, so then she can get certain things. But mizone dumate akiv gabe leisla. But mizone sustenance, which would basically encourage them to remain together, or at least encourage her to stay with him, that is not something that we're going to include. Amalei. So Rabbi Yochanan responds, leisla, she does not get mizone, right? The husband is not responsible to pay for her loans. V'atanya yeshla. One second, we have a brayso that says that she has it. Kitanya ayi la'achar misa. That is talking about, if he dies, so then, sure. So then she would, be able to get paid back. But as long as they're alive, no. Is the Amr that those who say Amrle, the Rabbi Yochanan says Tanya Yeshla, that the brayso says that she gets these mizone. Habamod ba'otze kaitu, which Rabbi Elazar says, but don't they have to get divorced? So ve'elo Tanya Yeshla, Rabbi Yochanan says, but it says that she gets the mizones. Tanya ayila achar misa, to which Rabbi Elazar says, but that's only talking about if he dies, so then she gets the mizone, but not as long as they're married. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis takatora amon the kohen gadol kushavachlutzu the kohen hedget. So if you have a widow married to a high priest and a divorcee or a chalutzi married to a regular priest, yesh lo ksube peris mizonos blows. Says the brayso in that case. So regular ksube laws apply, right? The ksube nichsetzon barzel nichse milug. He's responsible to pay for her mizonos, her sustenance, belows. Whatever, if there's like garments that get worn out but they're still there, I guess she gets them back if they get divorced, whatever. Vi psula, and she is psula, right? She's a chalala. Uvlada pasul, and her children are chalalos. V'chofen osu la'otzi, and we force them to get divorced. Shnias midivrei sofrim, when it comes to shnias la'arayas, which are right also midrabanan, ein lo ksube, she doesn't get any ksube v'lo peris, and not nichse malug, right? If the husband eats the peris, he doesn't have to pay her back. Lo mizonos v'lo blows, and he doesn't have to pay for her sustenance or these worn out garments. V'ikshera uvla kosher, but since shnias midoraisa is not a problem, so she remains kshera. She's not a halala, and her children are not chalos. V'chofen osu la'otzi, and yet we force them to break up because it's shnias, shnias la'arayis. So Amr Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Pneima Amr Amona l'kohen gadol yesh l'ksube. How come we say that in the Reisha that by an Amona l'kohen gadol asher gusav achlutzu l'kohen edget, we say that the normal ksube halachas apply? Well, because when they're married, so he's pasul. If he's a kohen, he can't be functioning as a kohen while they're married, and she becomes a halala. And in such a case, when he's now pasul and she's psula, kansu also ksubas, they say the regular ksuba halachos apply, and they don't make anything special. There isn't really any reason to make any special enactments, because memela they're going to want to break up anyway, since now he's pasul, he can't function as a regular kohen, she's psula, right? And any children would be chalos, kilu. It's not it is not a very constructive, comfortable, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it's not a very awesome situation. They're going to end up fighting, whatever. They're going to get divorced. We don't need to make anything special. They'll probably break up on their own. But now, why do we say that by shnias midivrei sofim, that all of a sudden we're changing things and we're saying that she doesn't get any ksuba, she doesn't get mizonis, anything like that? Because since when it comes to shnias laharayis, at the end of the day, he remains kosher, she remains kshera, the children are chalos, there really is no incentive for them to break up. So therefore, you know what the incentive is? Well, she doesn't get mizonis, no ksuba, right? None of that stuff. So kind of make the situation artificially unpleasant so that they will not remain together. And therefore, when he remains kosher, she remains kshera, the children remain kosher. So we sort of fine her and say, look, you're not going to get any benefits from remaining married, no ksuba, no mizonis, no nothing. So, and hopefully that will, create a situation where they break up, because we do not want them to stay together. Rabbi Omer says, Rabbi, halalu tivrei tere in suichin chizik. Rabbi says, look, Kohen Gadol right? Amana the Kohen Gadol, Grusha. We're going to ask a kasha about Chalutza in a second, but Grusha the Kohen Hedjit. These are midoraisa, and because they're midoraisa, they don't need any special halachos, right? They don't need special chizik, anything to strengthen them. They're midoraisa. You're not going, hopefully you won't violate them on their own. Valolo devei sofrim, whereas shnius larayos are midorabanan. But devei sofrim tzrichen chizik, we need extra support from midorabanans, and therefore we say, you know what? By shnius larayos, she's not going to have any halachos, any protections of the ksubah. Okay. Now we see an additional opinion, and we're going to have to find that in a minute. Is this, who is this according to? But Davar Acher, another opinion, Ze hu magila v'zo hi magilaso. That in one case, that in the first case, by the let's say Amon of the Kohen Gadol, so where they're both pasul. So right, he now becomes pasul. She's psula. So in that case, she's not going to want to get married, but he's going to coerce her, right? Zehu Margila, he's going to coerce her, and therefore we make him responsible for the ksuba, whereas opposed to by the Shniyas Larayis, where they both remain kshere, so then she may be more inclined, right? Since she remains kshere, he remains kshere, the children are ksherim, she may be more inclined to just want to get married to him, and she may coerce him, so therefore she loses out on the ksuba benefits. So it depends who is coercing who. Now we want to know who is the one who teaches this davar acher, right? This alternate opinion. Is it, right? So Ika da Amar Reb Shimon ben Elazar Katanila. There are those who say that it's Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Reb Shimon ben Elazar who said that when it comes to a situation when he's pasul, she's psula, so then he remains responsible for the ksuba. But a situation where they're both kshere, then she loses her ksuba. How come? So umatam ka'amar, he's saying how come? Matam amru pasul vi psula konsu oso ksube. How come we say that when he's pasul and she's psula, so then they find him and make him responsible for the ksube? It's because he is the one who's coercing her in that case. Matam hu kosher vi kshera konsu oso ksube. And how come in the situation when he is kosher and she remains kshera, so then she loses out on the ksuba benefits? So it's because in that case she would be the one who's coercing him. I don't know if coercing is the word, maybe I don't know, alluring, egging on. Hikata Amar, there are those who say Rebbe Katanila, there are those who say that it's taka. Rebbe who's giving this davar acher, this alternate explanation about the who's doing the egging on. Because he, his theory of Kohen of Amon the Kohen Gadol Gush v'Chalutza the Kohen Hedjit being the Oraises as opposed to Shniyas being the Rabbanan isn't really 100%, because while a Grusha the Kohen Hedjit and a Amon the Kohen Gadol are in fact midoraisa, a Chalutza to a Kohen Hedjit is only midorabanan. V'Chalutza the Rabbanan v'isla ksuba, because after all Chalutza is the Rabbanan, and yet she gets the ksuba, so the whole deoraisa thing doesn't really add up by Chalutza. Hadramar, so therefore he said, given the pasul law midorabanan zeo magila v'zoi magilaso, so therefore he went back and said, well, since midorabanan a Chalutza becomes pasul, so therefore in that case he would sort of egg her on, and therefore he's responsible for the ksuba, as opposed to Shniyas where they both remain ksherim, even midorabanan, so then she would egg him on, and therefore she loses her ksuba. Now, frag the Gemara, Ma'ika bein Rebbe to Reb Shimon ben Elazar. What would the nafkamina be between Rebbe and Reb Shimon ben Elazar? Right? That if we assume like the first way, that the Reb Shimon ben Elazar is saying that by Amar the Kohen Gadol, so he's responsible for the ksubah because he's gonna sort of egg her on, whereas by Shniyas Arayus she loses her ksubah because she eggs him on. And Rebbe says that it's about midoraisa versus the Rabbanon, that Amon the Kohen Gadol is the Oraisa and doesn't need chizik, so there's nothing special. Whereas by Shniyas Arayus is the Rabbanon, so we need extra support. So therefore we say that she loses her ksubah. So my ika ben Rebbe Reb Shimon ben Elazar, what would be a nafkemine between Rebbe and Reb Shimon ben Elazar? Rav Chizda mamzeres and Usini l'Yisrael kebenayu So the chiddush would be, the nafkamina would be, for example, a mamzeris or a nesina marrying a Yisrael. Mandam d'oraisa and amidoraisa. So according to Rebbe, who says that it's about whether it's an Isser d'oraisa or not, well, this is an Isser d'oraisa. Mandam p'nishu margila, he margila le. But according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who's saying that it's dependent on, who is egging who on, in this case, she's going to egg him on, since by, if a mamzer marries a Bas Yisrael, so she does not become, a halala or anything like that. And the child becomes a mamzer, but there's an opinion who says, by Reb Tar, there's an opinion of Reb Tar, who says you can sort of there's something by money that's called money laundering. So you can do mamzer laundering. You can have a mamzer, right? So if a mamzer marries a Bas Yisrael, the child is a mamzer. But if that mamzer then marries a shifcha, then the child becomes an eved. If you free the eved, then it becomes a regular Yisrael. Well, so it's not the end of the world, so therefore she will egg him on. And therefore she should lose her ksube. But what about according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that if you do mamzer washing, it doesn't work. The child remains in not just in eved, but a mamzer too. So halo margulales, then she's not going to egg him on. Below midi, nothing. Elam Rav Yosef, rather says Rav Yosef machzer grusha mishanise ike benayu machzer grushaso would be the nafkamina. Mandam d'oraisa and ami d'oraisa. According to Rebbe, who says it's about whether or not it's d'oraisa, well, machzer grushaso is certainly also d'oraisa. Mandam pneishu magila he margila le. But according to Reb Shimon Elazar, who says it's about who's egging on who, well, she's going to egg him on because she's already possible from the fact that she's divorced. She's not allowed to marry a kohen anyways from the fact that she's already divorced. So this doesn't really make it any worse for her. So therefore she will egg him on. Therefore she should lose the ksuba. Rabbi Akiva the Omar, according to Rabbi Akiva, who says yesh mamzer michai v'lavan, who says that you can have offspring that will be mamzerim from prohibitions, and therefore she won't egg him on because any children would become a mamzer. So ha lo margula le v'lo she's not going to egg him on. So Elam Rav Papa says Rav Papa pu'ulu l'kohen gadol yikebenayu. Well, if you have a kohen gadol who marries a be'ula, somebody who's right, a woman who's not a virgin. Now there's no issa, right? It says ki'im be'ula ki'im besula me'amav yikach isha. That needs to marry a besula, implying not a be'ula, but it's a lav, but it's an essay. But it's an essay. It's mandama d'oraisa and ami d'oraisa. So the mandama who says that we're concerned about d'oraisa, well, this is an issa d'oraisa. Mandama p'nishu margila ha he margila le. But if we're concerned about who's going to be, egging on who, well, she's going to egg him on in this case because the child won't be a chalal anyways. But according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who says that by chayve essay, such as over here, right, where, if he marries this woman who's a be'ula, so then the child will be a chalal, so then she won't be egging him on. That the nafkamina is, what if you have a situation where you have a husband and a wife that are married, he warns her that he doesn't want her to be secluded with a certain fellow. There are two witnesses that testify that she was secluded with that fellow. So in that case, they're not allowed to be together anymore. So madam midoraisa and I'm midoraisa. So midoraisa, they're not allowed to be together. So therefore, he would be responsible for the ksube. Madam pnei shehu magila ha hi magila le. But in this case, she would sort of egg him on, and therefore she would lose her ksube. Rav Masi ben Charish the Amar. What about according to Rav Masi ben Charish, who says that if when they're on their way to Jerusalem they sleep with each other, she becomes a zona? Well, in that case, she won't be egging him on. That the nafkamina is a definite sota, that she's been confirmed to be a sota, that she had a relationship, and in that case it is asur midoraisa. And so according to Rebbe, he would be responsible for the ksuba, but at the same time, I guess she's got nothing to lose. She would, it doesn't change anything. She would egg him on, and therefore she would lose her ksuba. Well, friends, that was Daf Pehei of Masechta Yevamos. We talked about a whole bunch of things on Daf Pehei. At the beginning, we talked about, what we learned about from Rabbi Yehuda Amarav from yesterday. Can a kohenes who's kshere marry a chalal? And the answer is yes, according to Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. And we learned about punishments being equal for men and for women, right? In general, we learn out from Me'ila, it says, right, Ish o Isha, what does it say? So we compare men to women by all prohibitions. They apply equally to men and to women. However, we did say that, but if it only refers to a specific subsect, such as Kohanim, so we have different psukim that we learn that out from, right? Specifically by a Kohen marrying a grusha, or a what was the other one? Or a zona, halala. So in those cases, we need a special lima to teach that it applies to Kohanim as well, that men and women are equal in that regard. Then we talked about the ksube payments for, Aman al-Kohen Gadol, Gush v'Achlutz al-Kohen Hedjit, as well as like a Shniyas Larayos. And we had ultimately, that we said it, first we had talked about how she would not get mizonis, right? Initially the Gemara had said that by Shniyas Larayos she would not, by Aman al-Kohen Gadol, Gush v'Achlutz al-Kohen Hedjit, she would not get mizonis. But then we had a brisa that says that that by Aman al-Kohen Gadol, Gush v'Achlutz al-Kohen Hedjit, she gets ksube, mizonis, Paris, all sorts of things. But by Shniyas Larayos she does not. And the question is, why not? So we saw machlokas between Reb Shimon ben Elazar and Rebbe. Reb Shimon ben Elazar says it's because whenever we have that he is pasul and she is psula, so then he is responsible for the ksuba. But if they remain ksheris, such as by Shniyas Larayos, so then she loses her ksuba. Rebbe says that it's about mida oraisa versus mida rabbanon, that by Aman al-Kohen Gadol, grusha, and not exactly chalutza, the Kohen Hedjit says mida oraisa. So therefore, we don't need any special strengthening of anything because we take it seriously anyways because it's mida oraisa, and therefore it's just kind of the regular halachas of ksube. However, when it comes to the rabbanon, such as Shniyas Larayos, so we need some extra strengthening. So we say that she loses her ksube, and she doesn't have sort of the security of her ksube in that case. We then saw that there was an additional opinion that explains that it has to do with who's going to be egging on who, that if they're both psulim, so then we assume that he would be the one egging her on, but if they're both ksherin, then she would be the one egging him on. We tried to find nafkaminas between Rebbe and Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Ultimately, we said that if you have a situation of a sota, in that case, well, it's still asur mida oraisa, so therefore, according to Rebbe, she would get her ksube, and according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, she would be egging him on to this relationship since she doesn't become any more apostle, and therefore she would lose her ksube. Friends, that was Daf Pehei of Masechta Yevamos. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.